welcome to WomanVision TV. I'm your host, Nadia Jordana, and this is part 2 of 2 recent interviews with Dr. Susan Strauss. She is a nationally and internationally recognized expert on harassment and bullying. She consults with organizations to assist them in their harassment and bullying prevention and intervention strategies. In the workplace, she coaches those employees who harass and bully to teach them alternate ways of communicating. Today, we're talking about sexual harassment and bullying in the workplace. Susan, welcome to the show today.
Thanks, Nadia. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, it's good to have you here. We're going to be talking about harassment and bullying in the workplace. And it seems as though discrimination and harassment expanded beyond just sexual harassment. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, big time. In fact, we're filming this in Minnesota, and when we talk about protected classes, we're talking about a group of people that are protected from discrimination. Of course, we all are for any number of reasons. And in Minnesota alone right now, we've got about 17 different protected classes, so race and gender and sexual orientation and disability, and every state will have their own. I mean, for example, in Minnesota, even if you belong to a human rights committee, you're a protected class. So what we're seeing has far exceeded just sexual harassment. In fact, the complaints that have come forward to the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the most frequent in 2011, we don't have the 2012 statistics yet, was retaliation. 37% of complaints to the EEOC was retaliation, and then was race, and then was sex, and then was disability, and then age. So those are the top.
And I don't know what the EEOC is specifically. Tell us what that is.
Okay, it is the federal agency that serves to follow up with organizations to make sure that they're following civil rights law. So they will come in and do investigations. People can make formal complaints to them. They themselves will sometimes sue an organization if they see failure to abide by civil rights law. So they're a federal agency, and that's in comparison to each state has a state agency that's sometimes referred to as a civil rights agency or a human rights agency. It depends on the state.
Are there complaints that you hear most often with that organization?
Well, again, it was the retaliation was the most common, followed by race and then sex and then disability and then age. Now that was for the federal, but the state plays a role in the federal complaints as well.
Okay. Well, what should workplaces do to prevent harassment and bullying?
Well, and bullying occurs as well in the workplace. It's very prevalent, as a matter of fact. And what they need to do is have adequate policies that deal with both harassment of the different protected classes as well as bullying, which is often it comes through as a code of conduct policy. They need to conduct training on all forms of harassment, and managers require a different component of training than do regular employees. They need to be doing training on bullying as well and what it looks like. Sometimes bullying, for example, is so subtle, it's so nuanced that it almost becomes invisible. There's a lot of micro-bullying that goes on. And then they need to make sure that whoever is in charge, usually it's HR, of conducting investigations, that they've been trained. I frequently will see that HR people, I work as an expert witness for lawsuits dealing with sexual harassment in the workplace and in schools, and what I see frequently is that HR folks have not been trained in how to conduct investigations and do not conduct them adequately. And then they need to have teachable moments and discipline procedures, and they need to monitor and make sure that the behavior has stopped and that there's no retaliation.
And is there crossover between the two things, harassment and bullying?
Yeah, you know, there can be, and we're finding that the boundaries between harassment and bullying can be blurred. Let me give you an example. There's something called gender-based sexual harassment. So let's say, for example, I did my research on this for my doctorate. We know that in the operating room, there's a fair amount of abuse in the operating room. So it's usually bullying. So what I did is I looked at whether or not the bullying that occurred from physicians to registered nurses, was that bullying a result of their gender? And if so, did the male nurses experience the bullying as much as the female, and did it impact the same? And what I found out was that the female nurses were viewed the bullying they experienced much more severe, and it impacted their work environment compared to the men. So it wasn't sexual in nature, but they were targeted in different ways than the men were. So that's what we call gender-based bullying, gender-based harassment, I'm sorry. So it's bullying behavior that occurs because of the target's sex in this case, or it could be because of their disability or their religion or their age. Then it's no longer bullying, because bullying is status blind. In other words, it doesn't have anything to do with your class. And it then becomes bullying because of your protected class, which is a violation of civil rights law.
Okay. Well, is this illegal?
Is what illegal? The bullying?
The bullying.
Good question. We have no federal laws against bullying in the United States. Europe has a lot of laws against it. We have no state laws against bullying. There have been 23 states, including Minnesota, who have introduced anti-bullying legislation. Minnesota's hasn't gotten very far yet, but 23 states, not one state has passed it. I think eventually it will get passed. However, even though we have no anti-bullying legislation on both federal or state, there are a number of what we call tort laws that can be used by employees to bring lawsuits against their employer. Things like intentional infliction of emotional distress, assault and battery, negligent hiring and firing, and a number of others. So employees are finding creative ways to challenge their employer when bullying is occurring.
Well, it's interesting that in Europe they've actually made bullying illegal, and yet it hasn't happened here.
That's right.
I find that very interesting.
Yeah.
We'll get there. I'm sure we'll get there.
I think we will too.
Well, Susan, thank you for being here today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And before we go, tell us a little bit about your background and some of the things you've done that's led up to these things that you're involved in.
Sure. Thank you for asking. Well, what I do is I am a consultant to workplaces and to schools about the issue of harassment and bullying. I work with them to help them establish adequate prevention and intervention strategies. I do training, and I conduct investigations on employee misconduct, and I also work as an expert witness for lawsuits dealing with civil rights violations for schools and for the workplace. And I've authored a number of different book chapters, articles, and books. So this is my passion. It's my life's work.
And your website?
Oh, my website is straussconsulting.net.
Thanks, Susan. And you're watching WomanVision TV. I'm your host, Nadia Jordana, and I'll talk to you again next time.